I'm ChosenArchitect, and this is All the Mods 10. So today we're jumping back into some more modern industrialization, and so far our progress has been swift, and I feel like we have been progressing really fast thanks to all of the things that have been set up in All the Mods 10. And I'm thinking that today we might be able to complete the advanced motor, and that is just a huge milestone, honestly, and is required for the All the Mods star. Now, even after that is done, there's still some things that we have to do. For example, we have to technically make fuel rods, which is going to take a little bit of time in itself, but we now have the ability, I think, to actually make ourselves an advanced motor today. But we still have to get a few other things processed. As of right now, we can make the algorithmic logic unit very simply. We can also make the memory managed unit very simply as well. Kind of. There's still a couple of things we have to do for this. One being making the silicon wafers, which we're about to do, and also implementing another skip, which is by utilizing platinum. We can actually just use standard platinum that already exists in the game, so no need to go through and make custom platinum from MI. So that allows us to do another skip. But like I said, the primary goal for today is to be able to definitely get these random access memories, get ourselves some silicon wafers, produce some argon, and also start producing the styrene butane rubber. My goodness, I'm about worded out. And we're just getting started. Now, just to recap, in case you missed a few episodes, what's going to make today's video possible is thanks to the distillation tower and all of the individual fluids that we're actually producing because of our distillation tower setups, and we're processing our oil in breaking them down and breaking down those components and breaking them down again until ultimately everything feeds into this one distillation tower, producing a lot of the materials that we're going to need today, including the ethyl benzene, this material right here. Okay, but before we start breaking down all of our individual chemicals and start making, this styrene butane rubber, I'm eventually going to get it right, we need to start focusing on getting argon, and argon is going to take a little bit of time, just judging by these values here. Looking at the centrifuge, it takes 3 buckets of liquid air to be able to produce just 35 measly millibuckets of argon. So to be able to actually produce liquid air, we got to get that up and running, and it's just done inside of a vacuum freezer. So we have ourselves the air, and this requires an air intake. Now I have all of the stuff for an air intake, so I think we just place this in here, and we now have an air intake. That's perfect. And hey, look, I have a vacuum freezer over here. Wouldn't that be nice if I could just, place this inside the input hatch and it just start producing air? That's exactly what it does. And that air is going to be a fluid, technically, and should end up in that fluid slot once it is done. You can now see we have liquid air. So what I want to do is I want to make sure we have this producing. I'm going to get it tick accelerated with the Souls mod, and it's going to end up going into a container that we'll have access to on our network. And now after I have the air produced, I want to go ahead and send that into our centrifuge and let that start producing. This is going to take quite a bit, and I have this set up so it's going to store quite a bit of fluids because it looks like in the production of this, it's going to produce quite a bit of nitrogen, a little bit of oxygen, and very little argon. And this is definitely a process that I'm probably going to want to make sure I have an overdrive module in and using soul surges to speed it up. Now, continuing our little wafer production here to make that silicon wafer, we need the monocrystalline silicon, and this is produced in a Canthal EBF, which I have up and running here, and that's going to require that argon. So I have a fluid input hatch that we're going to have here. We also need to send it iridium. Thankfully, we have iridium in the pack, which makes it very easy to just simply use an unpacker right here and then use a macerator to convert the iridium into dust. The unpacker will turn it into tiny, and we can just simply point this just like so and have that auto output directly into the EBF. And then right here, we'll have that auto output directly to the bottom of the machine. And so, yeah, we just need to align this with some exporters, putting in the silicon dust that we have produced into the back and the fluid here. Now, I think for this, what I'm going to do is use a downgrade to limit this to holding only 64 of these monocrystalline silicon. And that's to help reduce the incoming cost on the Argon, because we are not producing a whole lot of that. So I want to make sure that on that Argon, we only are using really what we need and not just producing an abundant amount of this stuff. And then for the processing here, we're going to throw this into a cutting machine. So we're going to have this and also a little bit of lube. And with those two things mixed together, that is going to produce our silicon wafer, and that's going to produce pretty quickly, and we can fill a drawer with that. So now the next on the to-do list is to make ourselves, oh man, the styrene butane rubber. And this is going to have multiple uses, but our primary use is to make that RAM. So getting started, let's go ahead and just assign this. We need 3 chemical reactors. I will just go ahead and place this in. Now, iron dust. I am going to need normal iron dust, not this iron dust. It does throw in the MI version, but I think we can drag this into it. There we go. And that fixes the kind of incompatibility with mixed materials. So there we go. So that is assigned. And then we go to the next one. And because I'm using these bookmarks here, it makes it so easy to just immediately pull in the new recipe. I am finding this bookmark to be rather nice for this particular reason. So there we go. And chromium dust as well, which we are producing from our bees. And then the styrene, which is what's going to be produced in this one. So slowly but surely, we're going to produce all of these materials. Now, the ethylene benzene, this right here, or the ethyl benzene, this is actually coming from our distillation tower. And also the butane is coming from our distillation tower. Something to keep in note, that is coming from the one that is 8 tall. So pretty large setup to technically make all of these materials. And so just like before in all of the other setups, like I said, when I originally started MI, I was mentioning there's going to be a lot of like repetitive things. This is just one of them. As soon as I get that locked and situated, then our next step can actually start functioning. And then whenever that produces, I just need to make sure to lock and add that to the network and so on and so forth, right? And then we just get these upgraded and things are going to be rolling. Before we get to making the actual RAM, there's also another chemical process that I do want to also get started, and that is going to be the polyvinyl chloride. And the polyvinyl chloride is going to be used to making the actual processing unit board. So once we have all of those 2 components, we will have everything ready to go. And cadmium, thankfully, we are already producing thanks to a centrifuge. So the way that this process is going to go is we're going to start off by making the hydrochloric acid, which is going to involve hydrogen and chloride. So we can go ahead and lock those recipes in. Moving over, we're then going to take that hydrochloric acid and we're going to use acetylene, which we are getting from our distillation tower. And that is going to give us vinyl chloride. And then after that, we then move to the next section, which is making the actual polyvinyl chloride, which is combining the chromium tiny dust, which we're getting from our bees, into the mix. And by the way, if you're wondering where am I getting chlorine, you might notice, yes, we are getting chlorine from a lot of other processes. For example, the salt into sodium. Yes, we are producing chlorine this way, which is kind of nice. So I guess this is the moment of truth. I went ahead and got platinum processing. I've got a few of those little things making the platinum wires. Thankfully, that is a huge skip that we get to do. We don't have to make the platinum with like the hot ingots and stuff like that. So it saves us on an EBF technically. But I'm going to go ahead and limit these barrels. And just like all of our other ones, we have these limited right here. This is a chemical reactor that is going to be outputting automatically to the bottom. And this is going to be what's producing our RAM. So we can actually set this in here. Now, notice the aluminum dust. We are going to have to actually drag in the correct aluminum dust, just making sure that we're keeping everything in the way that it's supposed to be. And so with all of these assigned, we can then set them just like this out, like you would hope to do. And then we need to take an exporter, and on that exporter, just like I've been doing, setting this to make sure it schedules it. We want to make sure to limit this. Now, also on here, I am going to limit this to the exact amount that is needed, besides the fluids. The fluids I can't really, I scroll to change the fluid amount, but on the items, we definitely can. So that way we can keep these at a reasonable amount. And it looks like it is a 1-to-1. So we just want to make sure that we have 1 of every single thing in here as far as our main items go, and that should keep things running nice and smooth. And also don't forget to limit the output. This is going to be up to 2, so that way it doesn't keep a stockpile of these in here either. And then we need to worry about the processing unit board. So this thing right here is going to take our circuits that are over here, it's also going to take annealed copper cables, which I think I have those annealed copper cable autocraft. If not, I'm going to have to definitely make a pattern for that. But yes, the annealed copper cables are going to look just like this. Very straightforward. Look at all these patterns, by the way. They're just so, I mean, I look at this every time and I'm just like, wow, there's a lot of patterns going on here. But yes, so I think I have every pattern. I have platinum plates produced. I have the cadmium batteries technically produced. These also require the anneal and battery alloy. I'm using this craft right here. We also have plenty of cadmium dust. So this is perfectly fine. And I think I can go ahead and assign this. It's also going to require that polyvinyl. And now what I want to do is, just like I did the other one, I want to go in and just set my limits on all of my items. And I shouldn't forget to change the plates as well. Yeah, that's just something I'm going to keep my eye on, because that could break the entire setup if that was wrong. So now's the moment of truth. A lot of work has gone into just making these few items. And man, I gotta give credit to those who have gone through the entirety of this mod. Woo! What a challenge this is. Just to keep your brain on track enough to be able to keep up with everything going on. It has been a wild ride so far. So all I need to do now is just simply apply some power to both of these machines, and we are going to be producing RAM, random access memory, and we're also now producing the processing unit boards. These looked so daunting when I originally was working on them, and now just seeing them here ready to go is kind of ridiculous. I don't know if I get anything for putting them in my inventory, but there's the RAM and there's our first processing board. Okay, definitely there's going to be something for the large motor. There has to be, right? I'm going to go ahead and lock these, and then we can use our linking tool to make sure these are all connected. This is something that I don't have connected, but basically now all we have to work on is be able to make the large motor, because we can already make the advanced motors, is to be able to make tungsten rods, which means we need to get into the tungsten processing. And the way that this works is we are going to take hot tungsten and send it through a Canthal EBF. Notice, by the way, we're going to be sending manganese sulfuric solution, which we're already producing, and it actually returns a little bit of that back, which is nice. So in the process of this, it's really only using using 500 millibuckets of it each run. Which is not bad. And we're producing raw titanium from this setup right down here. Now, I think for this, I am going to get a titanium B up and running, but for right now, I'm going to use some of the ore that I have to simply store in here, and we're going to use this to get our base titanium up and running before I get that B put together. So now that I have this, all we got to do is just simply export the two materials, or one's a chemical technically, and the other one is going to be our raw titanium with an export bus. And then for the return for our fluid, I'm actually going to use an interface just to have this send it just send it back into the storage that the original fluid came from, which is this one right here. So that way it'll interface automatically back into the drawer. And with those being soul surged, this whole setup is now producing titanium. Then we just need to simply process this stuff. So now to make that titanium B, it's just an iron and a diamond B combined together, and that produces a titanium one. And with our already produced titanium, now we can make the block of titanium, which will allow this to work. And you know what? I'm just going to toss this into our pre-existing one that we have manganese in. As is, we don't need to produce a ton of this. It's going to produce all of the raw ore we're probably going to ever need. So now technically midway through this episode, we now have everything really that we're going to need in order to make the advanced motor. I can go ahead now and I should be able to request this. I can't stress this enough, how much time it has taken to get to this point, but my goodness, I've actually had a bit more fun than I thought I was going to have diving into this originally. And I hope you guys have been able to follow along in this journey thus far. But yes, all I have to do now to make the advanced motor is just request a few of these things. So let's just go ahead and simply request a few of these items, and we can just make them. There was 6 motors, just like that. And then our processing unit, which I want to put in our inventory just to make sure that we get this thing. The processing unit is being made up. I mean, just look at this thing. I mean, it's just running through and just crafting a bunch of these little, small components. But man, honestly, the AE system is the one to thank on this. There's a single processing unit. Yes, there's the Bitcoin miner. I thought there might be an achievement for getting that. But there's that. And then we just simply need to craft a large motor. And that is one of the items required for the All the Mod Star, complete right there. That was a huge task. Now, there's still a bit more that we have to do, right? Because we need blast-proof casing, and we also are going to need uranium fuel rods, which technically are in the same line to be able to get both of those. Now, to get blast-proof casings, we're not done just yet because we have to process yet another item. And this one is a little bit weird. You could skip it if you had done immersive engineering, which I have not, by using an arc furnace. But in our case, I kind of want to go about it the like typical way. And I love how I'm rushing through and not even really explaining what I'm about to be making. That is tungsten, because we're going to need tungsten to make this mixed blast-proof ingot. This is how we're actually going to make that blast-proof alloy, or at least get started in making the blast-proof alloy, which is going to be required inside of our implosion compressor. Now, the implosion compressor, as you can see, to be able to make this does require these plates. So we need an initial start to be able to get here. And so making this is going to be a little bit painful. Now, you could go the arc furnace route, like I mentioned. You can just throw it in and you get a bunch of tungsten this way. But once we get the implosion compressor, making tungsten isn't going to be that difficult. Now, to get to tungsten, though, it is kind of a weird recipe because we need to look at the ingots, or sorry, the nuggets, and then we need to go back. So how do we get nuggets? Well, we need tiny tungsten. How do we get tiny tungsten? Well, we're going to need to use an unpacker on tungsten dust. And then how do we get tungsten dust? Well, we can either go about it by crushing the ore this way, or we can just simply use a macerator, which actually gives us a 50% bonus chance of getting an extra tungsten. So probably going to be this way to be best. And also to make sure you're constantly regenning raw tungsten, you can make a B, which I plan on making. And then you have this. However, the B, to get started, you actually need a block of tungsten. So we still have to do this process first. So first things first, in the array of machines is sending tungsten into our macerator here to be processed up. These are going to speed up. I'm also going to be accelerating these because this process is actually very time consuming, believe it or not. So we have that going in here. And then next step is going to be taking the crush and unpacking it. Yeah, we need to send the dust into here. So we'll take that, which is forming right now, right there. And then finally, we are going to take the tiny that's going to be producing, and we need to send that to be compressed into nuggets, in which I do have a compacting drawer set up. Now, perfect. The whole processing array is all set up just like so. But this is still very, very slow. The way that I'm going to speed this up is by simply putting upgrades in here, and I do have 3 soul surges on this. So yes, definitely want to throw in like a stack of these upgrades to get this going even faster. I think this is going to be necessary. This is going to be, like I said, our first way of technically obtaining those ingots. And perfect. Now that I have all of the tungsten, I have a block of it, I can now make the little B. So that way we have a constant supply being produced. I'm probably going to need a bit of this though. And this is actually something that I didn't know, but you can have more than one feeding slab together, which is kind of interesting. And I didn't know this until recently, but yes, you can put another feeding slab on the bottom and it doubles the block. And now we have even more spaces for things. I didn't even know that was a thing. So yeah, now for this setup, it may seem kind of crazy, as honestly it is, but I am producing a bit more tungsten because I've accelerated all of these compressors. However, there is a way that we could do this later on. I mean, technically we have access to it now where we combine all of these machines into one array. But I was thinking that this might be fast enough with these, but I do have to get the upgrades in here to make this actually worth it. And that's where I'm running into a rubber problem. So I've decided to solve my rubber problem by sending in a little bit of this for rubber. So yeah, we are going to send in some of our styrene butane rubber into this system. And this is going to be producing quite a bit of rubber. This only takes 200 millibuckets of this stuff to produce a stack of rubber. And so as soon as that decides it wants to run in the vacuum freezer, the importer should automatically pull those in and this thing should start kicking off. At least so I hope. And there we go. I accidentally had a fluid output hatch instead of an item one. But once this produces, we are probably going to have more rubber than I'm ever going to need. So of course, I am slowly but surely getting all of these machines upgraded so they're going very, very fast. This is going to be a huge bottleneck, but I've already got like 700 of the ingots going. Now I think it's time to start working on the other major part, and that is to make the Blastproof alloy. This is going to be a huge component that is going to require a lot of time to just simply produce enough so that way we can make the multi-blocks that we're going to need. For example, the implosion compressor is going to require blocks of Blastproof casings. And notice, yeah, before we can even make this faster, we have to make this multi-block. Lots of titanium, and yes, lots of components. Thankfully, though, I think I have a bunch of titanium already processed up, so we should be good there. Now, we just simply need to take our packer, and we need to start making these slowly but surely. Yes, I know. I can't say that enough. But yes, this is the recipe. The tungsten, the titanium, and the stainless steel. All of those are going to be the things and components that we're going to need to move to the next step. And ultimately, that is going to end up in the compressor, another compressor setup, and voila, that is also ready to go as soon as I get, well, an exporter on here. And so this very slow process begins. And I think this is going to be where I'm going to have to close up shop for today. And this is going to have to be the end of today's episode because this is going to take a little bit of time to build up before we can move on to the final step, which is getting those Blastproof casings and allowing us to make the uranium rods, which is going to have its own little progression that we've got to go through before we can get to that. But look at there. Oh man, Creeper Nightmare. Yes, we now have the Blastproof alloy plates after all of this MI that we've done so far. Man, I hope you guys have had fun watching this, and I hope you have learned something new. And of course, if you have, be sure to click that subscribe button if you haven't already, and give this video, guys, a huge thumbs up. And now, with that being said, it's now time to thank the amazing supporter of today's episode. And that amazing thanks is going to go out to, if I can spell the thanks, there we go, TuneAddict. Thank you so much for your amazing support and choosing to support me over on the Discord by becoming a Discord premium member and of course supporting me in one of the best ways possible. I honestly couldn't make these type of episodes without you guys, so I do really appreciate it, more than you'll ever know. And guys, I do appreciate all of you who have watched all the way through this episode. Even with the MI being as grueling as it is, I hope that I've helped you in some way, and I look forward to, of course, seeing you in the next one. And as always, thanks for watching.